They thought she was just another former prosecutor, someone easily dismissed. They never imagined who they were dealing with. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert's studio in New York buzzed with energy as technicians hurried behind the scenes and bright spotlights bathed the set in a dazzling array of colors. The studio audience, seated in rows of plush chairs, murmured excitedly in anticipation of the live broadcast. Tonight's guest was Pam Bondi, the former U.S. Attorney General of Florida, now a renowned political figure launching her new charitable project aimed at defending workers' rights. Though she had weathered countless storms in her career, Pam stepped into the studio with a measured calm, her silver cross, a deeply personal emblem of her faith, glinting subtly against her tailored suit. Moments after Pam took her seat on the plush couch, Stephen Colbert, the ever-charismatic host known for his incisive wit and sometimes biting sarcasm, leaned forward with trademark showmanship. With a self-satisfied, sardonic smile, he fixed his gaze on Pam as the cameras rolled. The bright studio lights made his expression even more pronounced, his eyes twinkling with mischief and calculated disdain. In a voice that echoed throughout the studio, he launched his opening salvo. "Ms. Bondi, is it true that you withheld evidence in a fraud case to protect a political donor?" The question cut through the ambient hum of the set. A stunned silence fell over the audience, their low murmurs ceasing as they absorbed the gravity of the accusation. Colbert's tone was both mocking and incredulous, a combination designed to unsettle and delegitimize. His eyes danced with irony as he continued, "Really, Pam, I'm curious. How does a woman of your stature, supposedly dedicated to upholding the law, decide to play favorites in the name of political patronage?" Pam's pulse quickened, but her face remained a portrait of serene resolve. For a long, breath-held moment, she let the silence stretch, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the smirking host. The audience shifted uneasily, some recording the unfolding drama on their phones, others whispering amongst themselves as Colbert's gaze intensified with each passing second. Caught off guard by the public nature of the scandalous claim, and aware of the delicate implications not only for her reputation but for the broader debate on political integrity, Pam's instincts erupted. Without raising her voice, she began to speak, her tone measured and collected. "Mr. Colbert, I must protest that this allegation is entirely unfounded. I have dedicated my career to serving the public with unwavering commitment, and I categorically deny any wrongdoing in that matter." Yet the cameras never stopped capturing Colbert's smug, almost gleeful expression as he shot back with a theatrical chuckle. "Oh, come now, Pam. Are we really going to pretend this isn't a scandal? The evidence, or rather lack thereof, speaks volumes. And it seems you're a bit too embarrassed to address this head-on." At that moment, the studio audience fell silent once again, the tension palpable like the electric buzz before a storm. Pam's eyes flashed, and in a swift, resolute motion, she stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor, drawing gasps from the crowd. "I will not sit here and allow my career, and my principles, to be besmirched by baseless accusations and media theatrics," she declared firmly. With that, she turned to leave the set, her graceful stride belying the storm raging within her. The audience watched in stunned silence as the once-assured guest made her exit, leaving Colbert momentarily speechless, his smirk fading into a look of incredulity. As Pam walked off the stage, she discreetly pulled out her phone and whispered into it, "Linda, be ready. I might call you." The words were soft, but they carried the promise of a strategy unknown to the host or the crew. In that charged moment, a single spark of intrigue ignited. Why would Pam, despite her credentials and calm, choose to withdraw mid-show? And what could this mysterious phone call signify in the context of tonight's shocking accusation? The stage was set not only for a confrontation between a respected former prosecutor and a famous talk show host, but also for an unfolding drama that promised to challenge power, expose hidden truths, and ultimately redefine the narrative of truth in the public eye. After her abrupt exit from the stage, the studio floor was momentarily shrouded in an uneasy silence. Off-camera, the hum of busy crew members and the muffled chatter among the audience contrasted sharply with the charged atmosphere that still echoed in Pam's mind. In a quiet corner of the green room, Pam Bondi closed the door behind her and took a deep breath. Her heart was still pounding, but her expression remained composed. A mask honed over years of battling injustice. She knew she had to respond, not just to the public's shocked gaze, but to the slanderous accusations levied against her live by Stephen Colbert. Sitting down at a small table in the dimly lit room, Pam opened her leather-bound notebook and began to review the criticism that had been flung at her on air. "They think I'm hiding evidence, that I'm protecting a political donor," she murmured to herself. Instantly, memories of a pivotal moment from 2016 surged through her mind. Back then, she had faced a similar barrage of allegations. In that case, a prominent British woman, Nadia Iweda, had been unfairly targeted for her religious display at work. Iweda's battle, which ended with the European Court of Human Rights ruling in her favor, had not only vindicated her but also set a global precedent for the protection of religious expression in professional environments. For Pam, the case resonated deeply. It reaffirmed her belief in the right to express personal convictions freely, even when met with institutional prejudice. Determination etched itself onto Pam's face as she began to formulate her counter-response. "I stand by my record and my principles," she whispered. "I was once accused of political favoritism, and I was exonerated. I will not let this baseless attack tarnish what I have built." She reread her prepared statement, filled with data and citations, and internalized each line, every fiber of her being burned with the need to expose the truth, that the allegation was nothing more than an orchestrated attempt to discredit her, born out of envy and ulterior motives. Meanwhile, back on stage, Stephen Colbert's mocking laughter and sarcastic jabs continued to reverberate in the minds of the in-house crew. His playful yet scornful tone had set off a firestorm of commentary on social media almost immediately. For Pam, it was vital, no imperative, that she not let the moment define her. Instead, she needed to reclaim her narrative and let the facts, not innuendo, speak for her. Reaching for her phone with a steady hand, Pam reviewed the notes that her team had discreetly compiled. Among them was a meticulously prepared dossier containing audio recordings of off-air exchanges where Colbert had made disparaging remarks about her past, along with extracts from court documents referencing her 2016 case. As she scrolled through the files, she felt the weight of injustice lift ever so slightly, replaced by a fierce resolve. It was time to reach out and secure a strategic advantage. With one swift motion, Pam tapped her assistant's contact, Linda, a trusted colleague whose expertise in both communications and legal strategy had been indispensable for years. Her fingers hesitated for a fraction of a second before she pressed call. In a calm yet resolute tone, she spoke softly into the phone, careful not to let the intensity of her voice betray her inner turmoil. "Linda, it's me. Get ready. I'm about to launch our counter-strategy. I need you to pull up everything on the 2016 ruling, review the evidence against me, and start drafting a statement for tomorrow. And check for any mention of negative comments from Colbert. We're not letting him get away with this." On the other end, Linda's voice was immediately reassuring. "I'm on it, Pam. We'll sort this out. You have all the evidence you need." Pam ended the call, a determined glint in her eyes as she gently placed her phone on the table. She glanced at the darkened corridor beyond the green room, knowing that soon, she would return to the studio and, with her evidence in hand, face her accuser head-on. The storm was only gathering strength, but Pam was ready to be the calm at its center. After returning to her green room, still reeling from the shock of her on-air exit, Pam sank into a leather chair and exhaled deeply. The echoes of the studio confrontation buzzed in her ears like distant static. Determined to get to the bottom of the unexpected attack on her character, she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope she hadn't noticed before. Its handwriting was neat but unfamiliar, a thin script pressed onto crisp stationery. Opening it cautiously, she discovered a letter filled with thinly veiled threats, admonishing her for rocking the boat and warning her that secrets must remain buried. Every word was laced with vitriol and a cold, calculating precision that chilled her to the bone. Her mind raced. Who could have sent it? The language and tone suggested someone with insider knowledge of the show's workings. a connection that went beyond a mere anonymous complaint. Pam's thoughts darted back to Stephen Colbert's shocking accusation on air, and the way he had smugly insinuated that she'd hidden evidence to protect a political donor. Could this letter be part of a broader plan to discredit her? The letter's ominous phrases hinted at a deeper conspiracy, and she suspected that her confrontation with the show was no isolated incident, but a premeditated effort. Her pulse quickened as she reread the letter, letting its implications settle in. The letter mentioned protecting vested interests and maintaining the sanctity of broadcast content, phrases that rang unsettlingly familiar in a media context. Pam's eyes narrowed in determination. If someone was orchestrating a smear campaign against her, they had already set the wheels in motion. But she wouldn't be a passive victim. Instead, she resolved to fight back by exposing every detail of the plan. Reaching for her phone once more, Pam recorded herself reading the letter aloud for clarity and to preserve evidence of its contents. Her voice, though measured, betrayed a hint of steel beneath the calm exterior. "This is unacceptable," she murmured as the recording captured every word. "Threatening, coercive, and clearly calculated. I suspect there's more to tonight's events than meets the eye." Pam's thoughts ran back to the previous confrontation. Stephen Colbert's razor-sharp commentary and the uncharacteristic venom in his delivery had not come out of nowhere. In her mind, she began connecting the dots. The letter, the hostile treatment by the crew, and the sudden rush to broadcast this scandalous accusation on live television. The pieces were starting to form a picture of a plot, one that might involve individuals behind the scenes, determined to tarnish her reputation and silence her message. She quickly sent a text to Linda, her trusted aide, urging her to comb through any previous internal emails or messages from the network that might be related. "Linda, I need every scrap of info regarding tonight's incident," she typed with urgency. "There's a trove of evidence. Threatening letter, suspicious orders, anything that might indicate a conspiracy. Call me immediately." Walking over to the window, Pam peered out at the bustling New York streets below. The city seemed oblivious to the unfolding drama inside the studio, yet she felt its pulse as a constant reminder of the stakes. If her adversaries succeeded in discrediting her, it wouldn't just affect her. It would be a blow to every person who had ever dared to stand up for the truth. Her mind wandered back to the 2016 case that had once nearly derailed her career, a case she had ultimately won when the courts exonerated her of any wrongdoing. That experience had taught her one undeniable lesson. The truth, when armed with irrefutable evidence, could not be silenced. And now, armed with the threatening letter and the memory of past vindications, she felt that familiar surge of defiance. She would not be cowed by behind-the-scenes machinations. As she studied the letter again, Pam realized its language hinted at a key element. Someone in a position of authority on the show might be colluding with competitors to undermine her. The meticulous choice of words, the cold detachment. They were not the ramblings of an ordinary disgruntled fan. They spoke of calculated malice. Her eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. Time was ticking. She had to act quickly. The seeds of doubt had been sown in the public mind during her departure from the stage, and she knew that the scandal could spiral further if not addressed. With her resolve cemented, she began drafting a plan to publicly counter the smear campaign. But one burning question remained. Who was truly behind this attack? The answer, she suspected, lay hidden in the unexplained orders and messages that had come from high up, a revelation that would shake the very foundations of the show. Before she could piece it all together, her phone rang. It was Linda. "Pam, I found something unsettling in the emails from the network last week," Linda said, her voice low and urgent. "There are directives that reference ensuring our integrity and managing unexpected guest behavior. It doesn't add up." Pam's heart pounded aloud in her ears as she muttered, "I was afraid of that. Linda, this is proof that there's a conspiracy, and it goes deeper than we thought." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. With her threatening letter in hand and new leads emerging from Linda's findings, Pam knew the next steps would be crucial. The storm was gathering, and she was ready to face it head-on. If only she could uncover the identity of the puppet master orchestrating the attack. Back in her green room after the press conference, Pam Bondi's pulse still raced from the on-air turmoil. Yet now, with Linda's urgent message ringing in her ears, she dove into the digital trail left behind. Scouring old emails and internal directives, she discovered unsettling details. Directives with phrases like, "ensure our integrity" and "manage unexpected guest behavior." Instructions clearly meant to control narratives and even silence influential voices. The final nail in the coffin came when Linda forwarded her an email marked "confidential action required" from an account belonging to none other than the show's producer, Evan Reed. Pam's eyes narrowed as she read the email over and over. It outlined a plan to discredit her by fabricating allegations of evidence concealment. The email's language was clinical and merciless, leaving no doubt that this was not an isolated incident but part of a concerted effort to neutralize her as a potential threat. Evan Reed had conspired, apparently in cahoots with powerful competitors, to engineer the attack on her reputation. Suddenly, the puzzle began to fit. Stephen Colbert's shocking accusation had been the public tip of an iceberg, manipulated and amplified by those behind the scenes. Determined to expose the plot, Pam gathered every scrap of evidence: screen captures of internal emails, copies of directives, and even off-air recordings of whispered conversations among the production staff. Each piece of evidence was meticulously archived in a digital dossier. Her hands trembled as she clicked through the correspondence, confirming the nefarious role of producer Evan Reed. The dossier painted a damning picture. Reed, threatened by Pam's influence and her potential to rival high-level competitors in the media landscape, had orchestrated the smear campaign. Outside, the studio corridors buzzed with speculation as crew members and journalistic insiders began whispering about the unfolding scandal. The air was charged with anticipation. Observers sensed that something big was about to break. Passengers who had been fans of the show started to question the integrity of its production, and social media was already lighting up with vague hints of scandal. Now armed with undeniable evidence, Pam felt her resolve harden. She drafted an urgent memo outlining her next steps, a plan to return to the air with a full exposé. In a quiet but determined tone, she recorded a video message, explaining, "I have uncovered evidence that not only exonerates me, but exposes a conspiracy at the highest levels of this show's production. I refuse to let corruption and the abuse of power go unchecked." The recorded video was inserted into her dossier, ready to be shared during her triumphant return. Her internal monologue roiled with determination. "They thought they could silence me with cunning schemes and cheap tactics. But the truth, my truth, will always shine through," she reflected. Each email, each directive confirmed that Evan Reed had pulled strings to make me seem like a criminal. That revelation was too potent to ignore. In the quiet hum of her green room, as the final adjustments were made for her return appearance, Pam's thoughts turned inward. Why should I tolerate this injustice when I have the power to change the narrative? She was not a victim. She was a fighter with the proof to back her up. With a deep breath, Pam stood and walked toward the studio entrance. The crew looked on, some with admiration, some with trepidation. She knew the stakes were now higher than ever. The story of her ouster on live television had already gone viral, and now she was about to turn the tables entirely. Stepping into the bright lights of the studio corridor, Pam's every step exuded quiet confidence. The time had come for her to reclaim her narrative. She was going to return on air, armed with cold, hard evidence, to expose the plot orchestrated by Evan Reed. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with the fire of a warrior ready to defend the truth. The following day, amid a growing maelstrom of online outrage and media speculation, Pam Bondi returned to television. This time, she was not there as a victim but as a force determined to reclaim her narrative. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert had scheduled a special follow-up broadcast in light of the scandal. As the familiar bright lights of the studio beamed down, the energy in the room was palpably charged with anticipation. The set was transformed. Additional screens had been set up, and the studio audience buzzed with murmurs of expectation. Pam walked onto the stage with the same measured determination that had carried her through the ordeal. Her silver cross sparkled subtly at her neck, a quiet emblem of her unwavering faith and strength. Unlike her previous appearance, today, she carried a digital dossier loaded with irrefutable evidence. Cameras captured every step as she approached the desk, and Colbert, who now sat with a noticeably subdued expression, greeted her with a tentative, almost apologetic nod. "Welcome back, Ms. Bondi," Colbert began, his voice softer than usual. "We're here today to revisit the issues raised in our last broadcast. Care to enlighten us once more?" Pam took a moment before speaking, her eyes scanning the expectant faces in the studio. "Thank you, Stephen. I'm not here to rehash baseless allegations, but to set the record straight," she said, her voice resonant and clear. "Last night, I was falsely accused of concealing evidence to protect a political donor. In the ensuing chaos, many questions were raised about the integrity of this platform and the forces behind it." She tapped her tablet, and the large screens behind her sprang to life with images of internal emails and directives. "This," she announced, "is an email from the show's producer, Evan Reed. You'll notice the language, confidential action required, and directives about managing unexpected guest behavior. These instructions were designed to discredit me and to create a narrative that paints me as a liar." A collective murmur ran through the studio as Colbert leaned forward, his earlier bravado replaced by visible concern. I had no idea," he stammered, his voice faltering as he glanced at the screens. Pam pressed on, unyielding. "In addition to the emails, I have recordings of off-air conversations from last night, where I heard disparaging comments about me and my work. These recordings, combined with evidence I acquired regarding my 2016 case, where I was falsely accused and vindicated, prove that the attack on my character was not spontaneous. It was orchestrated at the highest levels of this production." She paused, letting the gravity of her words settle. "I am here to defy those who would use media and power to silence the truth. I refuse to allow baseless claims and collusion to tarnish my reputation or the principles of justice and transparency." Colbert's eyes were fixed on Pam. The cameras caught the subtle shift in his expression, from one of casual disdain to genuine shock and remorse. The studio fell silent. Even the usual banter had died away. Finally, Colbert spoke, his voice uncharacteristically sincere. "Ms. Bondi, I apologize if any part of our previous discussion made you feel disrespected. I recognize now that the evidence you've presented is substantial, and I regret that I allowed sensationalism to overshadow the truth." A ripple of applause began to swell from the audience, growing steadily until it filled the studio with enthusiastic cheers. Colbert's face reddened slightly as the realization set in. He had been a pawn in a larger scheme. The confession had not only validated Pam's claims but had also cast a harsh light on the inner workings of the show. As the applause reached its peak, Pam's expression softened, but her eyes retained a steely resolve. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This isn't about me alone. It's about ensuring that truth is never sacrificed for ratings or political convenience. We all deserve better." Behind the scenes, the fallout was immediate. Journalists and social media influencers began to piece together the links between producer Evan Reed, the network's internal communications, and the smear campaign. The story exploded online, and hashtags like #TruthMatters and #StandWithPam trended for hours. Pam concluded the segment by stating, "I urge everyone to look beyond the headlines. Let's learn from this moment and demand accountability from our media and institutions. Truth is too precious to be compromised by those in power." The segment ended with a final round of applause, and as the cameras faded to black, Pam's last words echoed, "Fight for the truth, because it is the foundation of our rights and our future." In the days and weeks following the explosive broadcast, the story of Pam Bondi's courageous stand on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert took on a life of its own. Video clips of her defiant rebuttal and dramatic exit spread virally, garnering millions of views on social media and sparking widespread debates on free speech, media ethics, and religious freedom. News outlets across the nation picked up the story, and hashtags like #StandWithPam and #TruthPrevails trended as people called for accountability from those who misuse power for personal gain. Behind the scenes, revelations about producer Evan Reed's machinations rocked the network. Internal investigations were launched after several insiders provided evidence of covert directives intended to discredit Pam and silence her message. In response to the mounting public pressure, Stephen Colbert issued a public apology during a subsequent broadcast, admitting that his on-air comments had crossed the line of fair journalism. Pam, bolstered by the overwhelming public support, transformed her experience into a platform for change. Embracing her newfound role as a champion for the truth, she launched a nationwide initiative aimed at promoting transparency and integrity in media. In interviews, she urged her viewers always to question narratives, to seek the truth behind sensational claims, and most importantly, to stand firm against injustice. "If we allow falsehoods to go unchallenged," she passionately stated, "we let the powerful set their own rules. Stand up, speak out, and never be afraid to fight for your rights." As protests and legal reforms began to take shape, Pam found solace in the knowledge that her struggle had made a difference. Looking back at her journey, from the shocking accusation on live TV to uncovering a carefully orchestrated smear campaign, she realized that every moment of adversity had only served to strengthen her resolve. Now, with a clearer voice and a more transparent system on the horizon, the battle for truth and justice continued, inspiring countless others to question and challenge authority. What do you think is the most important lesson about integrity and truth in media from Pam's story? Have you ever witnessed a moment when standing up for your beliefs made a difference? Write your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. I hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a comment, sharing your thoughts about it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new and equally exciting stories. See you in the next video.